Paleo Runner podcast is devoted to finding better ways to live, run, train, and eat. I'm your host, Aaron Olson. You can find more information by going to paleorunner.org. If you enjoy the show, please go to iTunes and leave a review. Search for Paleo Runner in iTunes and click ratings and reviews. You can also follow me on facebook.com/runpaleo or on Twitter @runpaleo. I wanted to take a minute to let you know about a product I've been using called 3Fuel. 3Fuel is a sports drink that gives you fat, protein, and carbohydrates to use as a fuel source. Unlike sugary sports drinks, 3Fuel gets absorbed slowly into your bloodstream to give you sustained energy throughout your workout. If you'd like to give it a try, you can get 10% off by using the coupon code 3FOLSON. Go to paleorunner.org and click 3Fuel at the top of the page. If you're listening through the podcast app on iPhone, click the link displayed on the app right now. My guest today is Paul Jaminet, author of The Perfect Health Diet. He blogs at theperfecthealthdiet.com. Paul, it's great to have you back on the show. This is your second time. It's great speaking with you.
Oh, hi, Aaron. It's great to be back with you.
So, Paul, I'm really interested in this idea that you bring about in your book called Safe Starches. A lot of people in the paleo community are a little bit afraid of carbs, and I've read Gary Taub's work, and if you read things that he writes, it seems to imply that anything that raises your insulin is going to be very dangerous. But after reading your book, you have a really different perspective. Can you tell me a little bit about your basic idea of safe starches, and if you want, maybe just go over the diet in a general overview a little bit?
Yeah, well, the idea behind our diet is that the goal of eating is to nourish your body, and so we want to get all of the nutrients that our body needs, and we want to get them in just the right amount so that they're delivering the maximum possible value in terms of health. And so for most nutrients, you can either get too little or too much, and we want to be right in the middle at the optimum for everything. And for some of them, the optimum is very low. Like we think the optimal amount of omega-6 fats is probably between 1% and 3% of energy, and that's quite a bit lower than what most Americans eat. And carbohydrates, we think the optimum is around 30% carbs, and most Americans eat about 50%. So most Americans should reduce their carb intake. But I think a lot of people in the low-carb community have gone overboard, and they've said if less is good, then zero, or something close to it, may be best. And that's a mistake, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's especially a mistake for athletes. And so I think 30% carbs works pretty well for just about everybody. People who are more power athletes will benefit from going a little higher, like 40%, maybe 50% even. But for the most part, runners will do just great on 30%. And 30% carbs is very good because then you're eating closer to 50% fats. And fats are a very good fuel for running, and especially endurance running. And really, when you're eating 30% carbs, it's going to be taken up almost entirely by the brain, the immune system, and various structural functions of carbohydrate. For instance, its use in the extracellular membrane, or joint lubrication, or making mucus in airways and digestive tracts. And so there's various things we need carbohydrate for that don't have anything to do with muscles. And, so basically if you're eating a 30% carb diet, all of your carbs are going to those other purposes. Your muscles are working entirely on fat, and that's a good baseline situation for an athlete to be in.
Okay, so you mentioned there that it's a certain amount of carbs are important, and you've come up with this number of 30%, which maybe we could go into later of why you think that's appropriate. But can the body control whether the carbs go to our muscles or to our nervous system or our brain? Will the body just do that on its own?
Yeah. Yeah, the body has evolved mechanisms to manage that. And so, for instance, the brain gets most of its glucose by an insulin-independent mechanism. As long as you have glucose in the blood, it will go to your brain. So it just goes across a concentration gradient across the blood-brain barrier. And, whereas muscle cells will only take it up if stimulated by insulin. So in that case, the muscles are basically a disposal pathway for an excess of carbohydrate, or they'll take it up when they become starved of oxygen. And so the advantage of carbohydrates is you can generate the motor molecule for muscles, ATP, with less oxygen. And so that's why when you start getting short of breath, your body starts to shift over from fat burning to carbohydrate burning.
Okay. So, I mentioned at the beginning that some of the reading I had done, things like reading Volek and Finney, Gary Taubes, they seem to imply that having an insulin spike is very dangerous for the body. But I'm guessing your view on that is quite different. Can you tell me a little bit about whether you think insulin spikes are dangerous?
Well, it would depend on your definition of spike, but insulin is a beneficial compound. That's why we evolved it. So it supports health. Insulin is stimulated by protein as well as carbohydrate. And the only way to minimize insulin levels is through starvation. And starvation isn't good for either health or athleticism. So it's not the case that you want minimum insulin. What you want is the right level of insulin that helps promote lean tissue growth and muscle and athletic flourishing, but doesn't lead to various problems. And I think, to be honest, I think insulin levels are rarely a problem outside of diabetes. And even in diabetes, it's more that the nature. Insulin serves a coordinating function in the body, and it generally performs that function very well. So the problem usually isn't insulin, or even that you've eaten something insulinogenic. It's that you're malnourishing the body. You're eating too much of some nutrients, too little of others. You're creating infections or other sources of problems. You're disrupting your body in other ways. For instance, bad lifestyle, bad circadian rhythms. You stay up all night. You don't generally support your health in a good way. So there's usually a lot of external levers by which you're influencing your health, and it's usually if you address those levers, then your body will fix itself, and insulin will take care of itself. So it's an oversimplification to say that all you need to do is reduce carbohydrate, reduce insulin, and there's some other complications, like, for instance, generally speaking, when people eat carbohydrates, their tissues become more insulin sensitive, and as a result, the body needs less insulin in order to get cells to take up carbohydrates, and that means that people who eat some carbohydrates tend to have lower fasting insulin than people who eat no carbohydrates.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So even if you were to take the view that minimizing insulin is the goal, then you have to ask, what insulin are you minimizing? Is it the insulin after a meal, or the fasting insulin, or average 24-hour insulin, or something else? And, really there's not that much difference over a pretty broad range of carb intakes in average 24-hour insulin. So it's a tough it would be a tough case to make if anyone were seriously trying to make it.
Okay. So, Paul, since I read your book, I've pretty much been following pretty closely your diet, and you mentioned that we should include things like healthy fats to flavor our starches. Like, so if I'll have a baked potato, I'll have a baked potato with butter and sour cream. Why is it important to include some of those healthy fats?
Well, for several reasons. One is just to get a balanced diet and balanced meal, and that's easiest to do if you're if you make each meal balanced, then your diet will be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also because, in general, mixing different types of foods renders the food more digestible. For instance, if you have your potato with sour cream or butter, then the glycemic response will be better. The blood glucose levels won't rise as high. You won't get as much of an insulin spike if you're worried about that. The fat-related compounds in the potato will be digested better because the butter or sour cream will stimulate bile, and so you'll pick up various beneficial compounds from the potato more readily.
Okay.
And you'll slow down gastric emptying. Your food will spend more time in your stomach, which supports protein digestion and helps avoid food sensitivities and toxicity. Overall, you just do better eating a balanced meal where you have, some kind of meat, some kind of starch, some kind of vegetable, some kind of fat, some kind of acid is good also. So you should put vinegar on your potato as well as butter.
Okay.
And so, basically by the time you're finished making your meals as healthful as possible, they should taste a lot like a gourmet meal. So you should have very flavorful sauces for your food and things like that.
Okay. Paul, one of the things I really like about your diet is that it's really convenient, it's easy to make, and it's you actually end up making pretty satisfying, delicious foods. And for example, I could have a safe starch like some white rice with a stir fry, maybe saute the vegetables and meat in some coconut oil, or include some grass-fed butter in there. But how do we know what the proper amount is? Say we're training for a 5K versus a marathon. How are we going to modulate those carbs? Can we just listen to our body, or is there some other rule we should follow?
Well, I think you only need to tweak the diet a little bit because, as I said, that 30% carb ratio, it basically doesn't leave any carbs left over for muscle. And, so the muscle will be insulin. It gives you just enough to make the muscles insulin sensitive so that after a meal, they'll take some of the carbohydrate up as glycogen and store it, and that will help you regulate blood glucose. So if you ate a very low-carb diet, then they would be reserving all of the glucose for the brain, and they'd let the liver take it all up, and you'd have what's called insulin resistance of a physiological kind. So your glycemic regulation gets better as you add carbs, but you're still not feeding muscles. They'll just use a little bit of glucose incidentally during the day or when you do intense athletics, and they'll be able to take that back up. And so what you may experience is having more energy for intense athletics and intense movement because you don't have the limitation of limited muscle glycogen.
Okay.
But since you're basically only supplying enough glucose for the brain and immune system and extracellular compounds, your muscles are, they're all through the ordinary course of the day, they're burning fat, and that's what they have for machinery. And so you're basically getting all of the fat burning training benefits. So a typical training strategy, will have you doing some, say, long baseline building at sort of a fat burning pace. So that's kind of like Phil Nafatone's, low intensity level thing, where you do a lot of running at a pace where your breath doesn't come too quickly, you're very comfortable, you're burning fat, but it's intense enough to challenge, to steadily increase your ability to utilize fats to bring in more oxygen to the muscle and to develop the muscle. And so you're building up your capacity to do more work in that fat burning mode. And then if you throw in some sprint intervals, which stress, which get you up into that intense carbohydrate burning mode and try and lift the limits there, then you can have a training regimen that exercises both pathways and stresses them and tries to maximize their capabilities. And then you'll be well prepared for a race where you're going to put out quite a lot of effort in the region where you're having difficulty breathing. You're burning as much fat as you can, but you're also burning a lot of glycogen.
Okay. Is there an advantage to burning more fat? Say you might be doing a half marathon or a 10K where you're really not at risk of running out of glucose. Is there an advantage to being more of a fat burner, do you think?
Well, I think you will be fat burning.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You can't go at a very intense pace for very long, and so you'll have a very substantial amount of fat burning in any lengthy race.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing is to prepare for it in your training. Okay. And so you want to do plenty of training runs where you're you don't want all of your training runs to be high intensity.
Right. Do you think that we can change the amount of fat burning just based on what we eat? I know your diet is around 50 to 60% fat. If we can eat that much fat, will it help us burn more fat while we're running?
Yeah. So, it's, biology is a lot like exercise. The more you practice something, the better you get at it. And, the more your muscles are burning fat instead of carbs, the more they get better at metabolizing fat. Okay. So they'll have more, for instance, of molecules that transport fats, like carnitine. They'll have more coenzyme A, which is needed to shuttle the energy in mitochondria. They'll have developed a better circulatory system for delivering oxygen because burning fats is oxygen intensive. So you'll have made all kinds of adaptations to fat burning, and one of the things people notice is it becomes very easy to fast on our diet, mm-hmm. and on any low carb diet for the most part. And the reason for that is simply that you've got everything in fat burning, well adapted to fat burning. That's its normal state. And when you fast, you're getting energy from fats. You're releasing fat from adipose tissue. Okay. And, so you don't have any change. Whereas if you've been eating a very high carb diet and all of your cells are used to metabolizing carbs and the carbs go away, they may have fats available, but they're not set up to rely on them. Mm-hmm. And so you get a little starved. Your cells complain, say, give me some carbs. And So that's a very common experience that people eating 50% carb diets have trouble fasting, and people eating 30% carb diets have no trouble.
Okay. Paul, you talk in your book about something called a ketogenic diet, and you talk about the proper way to do it. Some things that people might be interested in doing this for would be epilepsy or brain disorders, but what about people who are interested in doing events of marathon or longer? Do you think that a properly implemented ketogenic diet could be advantageous?
Well, I haven't seen evidence that it's advantageous for athletes. So, one advantage of ketogenic dieting is that it can get ketones to mitochondria without any active transport. So fatty acids need to be transported. So you need to train yourself in order to burn fats, and you need to generate things like carnitine and so on, whereas ketones can bypass all that transport. So one thing they found is that if someone has a heart attack and you give them ketones, then that will greatly aid their recovery from the heart attack, and they'll suffer less damage to the heart. And that's because you're not delivering blood well, but these ketones are small molecules that just diffuse everywhere. And so they can get to places without, even when your active transport mechanisms aren't working. And that means if you go into ketosis, you may be able to make a shortcut around some missing training adaptations. If you haven't thoroughly trained yourself to metabolize fats, you might be able to get some of the benefits of improved fat burning, by generating ketones. But in terms of a trained athlete, I think fats should be able to do everything ketones can do. And the trouble with ketogenic diets is that, first of all, people commonly get into ketosis in part by starving themselves of carbohydrate and protein, and that's not good for you, and it's not very good for athletes either. So, like I said, if you're an athlete, you want to be well adapted to both fat and carbohydrate burning, and it's hard to get well adapted to carbohydrate burning if you're starving yourself of carbs. And so that type of ketogenic dieting, I don't think is optimal for an athlete.
Okay.
And now we recommend ketogenic diets as therapies for various conditions, and we recommend doing it with a minimum of carbohydrate and protein restrictions. So we recommend, eating a fair amount of starches and a fair amount of protein. But sort of flooding your liver with MCT oil or coconut oil. Okay. And generating ketones. So then the liver generates ketones as a way of getting rid of those medium chain triglycerides. And so that type of approach to a ketogenic diet wouldn't be as bad for athletes, but I'm not sure it has advantages either.
Okay.
So, I'd like to see this get tested, but I haven't seen that there are advantages. And I think actually a saturated fat-rich diet might be better than a ketogenic diet.
Okay. And that's basically, when you say a saturated fat-rich, that's basically what you recommend in your diet for most people, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the fats we recommend tend to be saturated fat rich, so things like butter or cream or beef tallow.
Okay. So do you think that perhaps Kenyans would do better on a saturated fat diet? I mean, I know they're eating a lot of stuff called ugali, which is like I think it's like a corn mush, and sometimes they'll put like an oily sauce over it. But what do you think about that when we look at really top performing athletes? Do you think that there's any chance that they could do better on something more like the Perfect Health diet?
Yeah, I do. I think they would do better. A lot would depend on the quality of the oil that they're using. If they're using vegetable oils that are high in omega-6, I think that would be terrible for their athleticism. I think it's fine to eat carbohydrates with oil, so that can very easily be, right in line with our macronutrient recommendations of like 30% carb, 50% fat.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, fat has 9 calories per gram and carb has 4 calories per gram. So if you're at 30% carb and 50% fat, you're eating more carbs than you are fat. Mm-hmm. And then fat you often get as oils, which are pure calories, whereas carbs you often get as food, which is things like potatoes that are mostly water. And so actually it only takes a relatively small amount of oil on most carb foods mm-hmm. To get to that ratio. So it could be that those Kenyan athletes are eating, exactly our ratio already. It would be interesting to see what they do and what their lore is about what the optimal food for athletes is.
Mm-hmm. How about body composition? A big thing for running is having, at least I think, is having the right body composition. And if we look at the elite athletes, they have a very low BMI. How can we go about making sure that our bodies are at the optimal composition?
All right. Well, body composition is number one a function of how you eat. So do you nourish your tissues properly with nothing left over? So if you have a lot of leftover calories by the time you get your body nourished, then they'll have to go somewhere, and your body composition won't be as good. Another issue is inflammation, which causes you to gain fat and to gain water weight and to have leaky extracellular matrix scaffolding, and to have various to gain weight in multiple ways. And so it's very important to nourish your immune system, to get things like the fat-soluble vitamins and vitamin C, to eat plenty of collagen sources. So there's various things you can do to minimize inflammation, and then so PhD actually does both of those things. So if you're on the perfect health diet, you'll tend to have very good body composition. And then if you're just running a lot, then you'll tend to get a runner's body.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any advantage to restricting calories so that you achieve a certain body mass index? I know a lot of the elite marathoners are around 18.5 or somewhere in the 18s. But what if your body just doesn't naturally want to go that low? Would there be any reason to then restrict calories?
I don't think that's a good idea. I think your body usually knows what it wants and has good reasons for wanting it. Mm-hmm. And not everybody has the genetic endowment to be a top marathoner. And right. So if your body wants you to be a champion power lifter, then maybe you shouldn't try to be a marathoner. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing I would say. I think it's I think if you train like a marathoner and do lots of running, then you will tend to be quite slender. Mm-hmm. But some of your body shape is set in your genes, and some is set at early developmental ages, like in the womb. Mm-hmm. And so you can't easily change every aspect of your body.
Right. Paul, you're a really productive guy, and you're writing a lot of blog posts, and you're doing perfect health retreats, which I'd like to hear about. But what are some of the hacks that you use to be so productive? Can you share with our listeners some of those things that you do? Do you have any tricks?
I would say my number one and only trick is just to be healthy. And, so I find I'm tremendously more productive when I'm healthy than when I'm unhealthy, and I've been unhealthy. So, it's very good to be in good health and to be able to, have lots of energy and to be able to focus your energy on whatever task you choose to focus it on. Mm-hmm. And then apart from that, I wouldn't say that I try to be very productive. I just have a lot of things that I enjoy. I enjoy my work. I enjoy working. Mm-hmm. And, so I just, devote time to that. And then when I get tired, then I do something else that I enjoy. And, so the things I make a point to make time for, I make a point to go running every day. I make a point to eat on a fixed schedule and to get 8 hours of sleep every day. And, I actually take a certain amount of time away from work and productivity just in order to try and keep myself in good health.
Okay. So you mentioned that you eat on a fixed time every day. Is that to try to get your circadian rhythms working properly?
Yeah, exactly. So you want to expose yourself to bright light over a fixed period of time every day, preferably like a 12-hour window. And within that 12-hour window, you want to eat within a fixed time period, like preferably an 8-hour window. And you want to get, just before eating, you want to get exercise. So I try to exercise a little bit twice a day. My primary exercise is around midday. I go running, and then I have my first meal of the day immediately after getting back. And then I try to do a few minutes of exercise in the late afternoon. And those are more body weight type exercises like push-ups, pull-ups, squats. And then I go to the gym once a week to lift weights. Mm-hmm. Basically that whole regimen is designed around circadian rhythm optimization. So you need to stimulate it with light and then with darkness or red, yellow light at night. You need to have your food intake happen in the daytime and preferably in a restricted window. So I do intermittent fasting, about 16 hours fasting, 8 hours feeding a day. And you need to get exercise. So about 30 minutes of moderately intense exercise is enough to entrain circadian rhythms, and that's about how much I run. So those are the main factors. And then ambient temperature, you want a relatively warm environment during the day, a cool environment at night. And social interactions, you want to engage with people like we're engaging with each other right now during the daytime, and you want to relax and be comfortable at night. Circadian rhythms they're just incredibly important for health, and people don't appreciate how much they can impact their health by how they stimulate the body with these external lifestyle factors.
So you do a lot of writing, and I'm guessing you're indoors. Do you put your computer by a window? Do you stand up, or do you use a treadmill desk? What do you do to kind of mitigate some of all that sitting that comes along with writing sometimes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have my desk elevated on cinder blocks, so it's about waist height. So I can stand in front of it and use it as a standing desk. And I have my monitor up at eye level. I also have a draftsman's chair, which just happens to get up at the top to just the right height for sitting, so that without changing anything else, I can just move from standing to sitting and work sitting down. I also have a piano bench that I can kneel on, or when I'm standing, I can put one foot up on the piano bench. And so that gives me 3 alternatives. And then a fourth alternative is I have a desktop computer, but I also have a laptop. And if I'm just doing reading, then I can go take the laptop and I can sit on the floor, sit cross-legged, or yoga pose or something, and read while sitting. or I could use tablets for that also. And, so I just try to get in lots of different postures and positions during the day. I found that sitting all the time is not so good, but standing all the time might be even worse. But what's really good is to get into a variety of postures as much as you can. Get into folded postures and extended postures, and do lots of shifting of positions and moving. And then for light exposure, that's very important. My desk does face the window, but I also have a light box, and I have F-Lux on my computer, and I have lots of bright lights in my office, and so I turn those on during the day, and then we have some amber lights for nighttime lighting, and at night I turn off all the white lights. You can wear blue blocking glasses, or use amber lighting, and use F-Lux to tone down the computer. So there's a lot of things you can do to optimize your environment.
Okay. You mentioned there that standing might be worse than sitting all day. Why do you say that?
Well, any posture where you're stressing parts of the body all the time can be harmful. So you really need variety. And in terms of standing, for instance, it's a bit of a hardship to pump blood up from the feet up to the top of the body all the time. And if you sit down, you've got a couple feet less of distance between your heart and your feet, and that can make a big difference in terms of ability to pump blood. And you're also while you're sitting, your feet are a little free; they're unweighted, and so they can move more. So you're more likely to flex your ankle and so on. And that's one advantage of having like a bench where you can, so right now I have one foot up on the bench, and so my knee and my hip joints are bent, and I can move my body around and get into different angles and actually do a little stretching while we're talking. Okay. But it's not uncommon, for people who are standing all the time or even walking all the time, like waitresses, to end up with swollen feet or, things like that. And I also found, when I was standing all the time, that I was starting to lose range of motion in some joints, and I had to commit to doing like half an hour of yoga a day in order to, not lose range of motion in the hips or, whereas now that I have quite a bit more variety in my working positions, I don't, need to do nearly as much stretching to keep mobility in my joints.
Interesting. So, Paul, what's next for you? What are you working on lately?
Well, the thing that's been keeping me really busy is our Perfect Health retreats in Austin, Texas. And they've been fabulously successful from a health point of view. So everyone who has gone has seen tremendous health improvements. And I just, before talking to you, got off the phone talking with a woman who had, chronic fatigue and brain fog for decades. And for her 50th birthday present to herself, she, bought a month at the Perfect Health Retreat. And she's lost weight, she's improved her sleep, she cleared up she said her energy went from 20% of normal to 80% of normal. And, she'll hopefully get the last 20% back soon. And, her brain fog went away, and she lost 8 pounds. So, we just had a tremendous number of success stories. We had one woman who was scheduled for 2 knee replacements and a hip replacement and was in pain all the time and walking with a cane. and now she does full-time gardening, and is in tremendous shape, and pain-free, athletic, and so great things can happen if you fix your diet and lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit more about that retreat. How many people go to it, and what does it involve?
All right. Well, we've typically been having like two to three people per month, and of course we'd like to have more. There is capacity for up to 14, and so we have to spread the word about it. But hopefully, as we keep having so much success in health terms, we'll get more people to come. And so basically, we have a 30-day program, which is enough to teach everything and to instill habits, and for people to see real health results. And fortunately, everyone has seen great health results. We've had everybody who came with diabetes has normalized their blood glucose. Everybody who is overweight has lost weight. So it's been really successful so far, and I'm pretty confident that in health terms we'll continue to be successful with just about everybody who comes. So every single person who's come has had significant health improvements so far, and wow. I'm sure there will come a time when somebody comes who can't be helped, but I'm beginning to think that might be quite a long time because our statistics are really good.
Great. Paul, do you think that you'll ever come out with a cookbook?
Yeah. My wife and I are working on it, and we'll get it out as soon as we can.
Oh, great.
So fortunately, Russ Crandall has come out with a Perfect Health Diet cookbook.
Okay.
And that goes on sale. That's on sale now for pre-order. It'll be shipped in February. That's called The Ancestral Table. And then I'm also working on a video product that will be called Perfect Health University. And so that will be an educational program delivered through videos on how to be healthy. And so that's those are the things that are keeping me busy.
Okay. Well, Paul, it's been great having you back on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's great fun as always. And if people want to learn more, they can go to our website, perfecthealthdiet.com.
You've been listening to another episode of Paleo Runner Podcast. For more information, go to paleorunner.org. Thanks for listening.